You're listening to a podcast of Master Your Finances with me, Kurt Baker, a certified financial planner professional. Sunday mornings at 9 a.m. on 1077thebronx.com. Good morning and welcome back to another edition of Master Your Finances, presented by Certified Wealth Management and Investment. I am Kurt Baker, a certified financial planner professional located in Princeton, New Jersey. I can be reached at our website, which is www.cwmi.us. Or you can call me directly at 609-716-4700. We're very pleased to have with us today William, or Bill Keep, who is a PhD, who has served for 9 years as the Dean of TCNJ School, which is near and dear to my heart because my daughter went there, of Business, before being named Interim Provost and Vice President of Academic Affairs. He also holds the rank of Professor of Marketing at the College of New Jersey. As Chief Academic Officer, Dr. Keep works closely with fellow administrators, faculty, and staff to support more than 50 degree programs delivering the rigorous and supportive educational experience for which TCNJ is known for. So you've got a long academic career, but one of the reasons we're here today that I want to talk about is you're also an expert in what is commonly known as multi-level marketing, but you have a different term for that. If you want to tell us a little bit about that and maybe how you got involved in it.
Sure, and thank you for your interest, and thanks for inviting me today. We know this industry has harbored illegal pyramid schemes, and it's been a persistent problem in the industry and one that I got involved in the mid-'90s. I was a young faculty member at the University of Kentucky, and the Department of Justice came to the business school and asked if they could get some help for an expert witness on the prosecution of a pyramid scheme. In this case, it was a pyramid scheme selling gold. It was called Gold Unlimited. The prosecution was in Western Kentucky, and it was actually a criminal prosecution. So I worked with the Justice Department. It was my first research into the area in pyramid schemes, and the prosecution was successful, and the founders each got 10 years in prison. So that started me down the road. I started to learn more about it. I worked in a private case between Procter & Gamble and Amway. I was then attending a conference and met the senior economist at the Federal Trade Commission, Dr. Peter Vandernet, and he and I have since written 2 academic papers on this topic, and I've been involved in some state and federal cases. I just wrapped up a case with the Federal Trade Commission this year, and it was a Bitcoin-based pyramid scheme. All of these schemes claim to be operating a legal form of multi-level marketing or network marketing. And the problem, of course, has been, why can't we easily tell the difference?
Why can't we easily tell the difference between network marketing and well, they give you an opportunity. They say, I'm just trying to think back when I think everybody's been at some way, shape, or form touched by this, whether they've just been presented to, whether they've actually bought into certain ones. I know that I've done a couple of these when I was very young, tried these things, and it was always about getting in. Here's the terms I used to hear, right? Get in on the ground floor, build this base, just, it's a great product, and you're going to get it at discount, and then you're going to sell it to your friends, and then you're going to get this recurring income. And the longer you're in it, the more money you're going to make, and you get all these different levels where eventually you're the guy sitting with a jet plane behind you in one of the commercials, right?
That's right. That's exactly right.
So it's kind of, I think it's the same story regardless of which one it is. And I guess I was exposed probably first time, I'm going to say probably late 70s, early 80s, I'm going to say. I don't know how. I know Amway was around then. I think at that time there was relatively few of them, but I believe a lot more started coming on board at that period of time. And then it kind of faded away and I got into like the real world, so to speak.
Right. They think they are in the real world, and they have a trade association that promotes that view all the time. The 1980s were, in fact, as you said, a very interesting time. That's when a lot of new ones came into being. And what happened there was in 1979, the Federal Trade Commission, after a number of years of investigation and a case before an administrative law judge, agreed that Amway was not an illegal pyramid scheme. And so, in fact, that's the only multi-level marketing company that's ever been publicly shown to not be a pyramid scheme. There are some people who take exception with that case and how the FTC handled it, but nonetheless, that's how it was resolved. After that, in the 1980s, we saw a whole rush of new companies, and they tend to spawn each other. In other words, the people who are successful in one will go and then create another one or join another one. But the building process that you described is a constant recruitment. And the danger here is the creation of what essentially is an endless recruitment chain. And the only real way to make money is to constantly recruit others. And if, in fact, that was completely known and transparent and we knew what the numbers were, then that may be one thing. But the reality is that there's a lack of transparency in this industry in a lot of different ways. And so, in fact, people join with no sense of probability of success and actually no sense of the path to success other than some generic path that gets kind of printed in brochures.
Right, which is usually written on a little pyramid.
Yep, sometimes.
Ironically, you should say that. Right, because if you go down and you go out, right, what do they call it, depth and I guess breadth, I don't even know the terms they're using, but I mean, it says you go down, you get two people to do this, you get two of them to do this, you get two of them to do this, and before you know it, you've got 1,000 people working for you, and you're sitting there enjoying yourself.
That's right, and what's really interesting in that process, as you describe it, is that in fact, as soon as someone no longer qualifies for earnings, because you must keep purchasing in order to maintain eligibility to earn. And so one of the sort of vocabulary terms that I take exception to is that the industry claims that these distributors are selling when in fact the only thing we know for sure is that they're buying. That they're buying from the parent firm and buying again the next month and the next month because they're required to. And so they make their purchases to maintain eligibility. As soon as that eligibility goes away, it's called breakage, and then the earnings that they would have earned move upline. And so we see this concentration of earnings up into a very, very, very small percentage of participants. And that's a real problem because anyone joining cannot possibly get reliable information on how that happens.
Oh, I see what you're saying. So if I don't really know kind of the path, right? So I don't necessarily know. I mean, if you go to let's call it a traditional company, right? You kind of know what the CEO makes. You know, like the executive office, vice president, senior vice presidents. You know, earnings, bonuses, things like that. So, but if you go into a multi-level marketing firm, I'm assuming that's not easily found.
It's not
to understand how that revenue is generated and flows through to the.
It's not only not easily found. When they do produce data, it's data that is not reliable, and I'll explain why. Some multi-level marketing companies have released what are called earnings statements, and they describe the percentage of distributors who were eligible for earnings, the percentage of distributors who earned zero, the percentage who earned $500 or $1,000, the percentage that earned over $100,000, et cetera. Now, on its face value, you might look at that and say, okay, well, 5% of the participants earned, let's say, in excess of $150,000. I have a 5% chance of earning in excess of $150,000. But that actually isn't true. And the reason it isn't true is because of what I call top earner persistence. So if, in fact, the same people who earned $150,000 and above this year earned the $150,000 and above last year and the year before that, then, in fact, there's very, very little room. And so if in fact, half the people persisted from year to year, your probability of success would be 2.5, not 5%. If 3/4, it would be cut again from 2.5 to 1.25. So in essence, you cannot tell from the data they've given you what the probability is success. The other thing we don't know about it is that, in fact, we don't know to what extent success can be manipulated or steered. So, for example, suppose I go to some young person and say, "Hey, we've known each other since I've known you since you were in college with my son. I wouldn't, encourage this for just anybody, but you're a talented, ambitious person. Why don't you take up this opportunity?" And so they join, and then I'm going to hold a recruiting event. So I hold a recruiting event. Now, I could invite anybody in my downline to that recruiting event, but I invite this person. And that person is then primed to have a new downline built underneath them. And so we don't understand sort of the politics of success inside of multi-level marketing. We don't understand the probability of success. And those in and of themselves are genuine concerns and have been problems literally for decades. But there is also a bigger problem, and that is misrepresentations, marketing deception, and even outright fraud. So the first evidence we see of it is claims by the FDA against a multi-level marketing company called Nutrilite in the late 1940s, early 1950s. And they were claiming that their distributors were making false product claims. These products can't do what you claim they can do. And of course, that reinforces the view that you described earlier when you said that someone recruits you and say, this is a really good product. Well, if we pump up what the product is capable of, and in fact, from that period, late 1940s to the early 1950s, until right now, we can demonstrate that misrepresenting what products can do is a common practice in the industry.
That's a very interesting point. We're going to definitely pick up on that after the break. You've been listening to Master Your Finances. I'm here with Bill Keep, talking about multi-level marketing or pyramid schemes, and we'll be right back. Welcome back. You're listening to Master Your Finances. I'm Kurt Baker here with Bill Keep, and we're talking about multi-level marketing firms. And I think the point you just brought up before the break, which I find is interesting, is I guess it was Nutrilite was talking about how false product claims. And when you said that, I'm thinking, okay, you give somebody, kind of say, hey, roll this opportunity out to everybody. They're going to tell you about all the great things about it, but they're really educated. I know in my industry, before I go and discuss something, I have some expertise. I'm required to expertise, or the entity won't let me go discuss it, right? There's a lot of licensing involved. There's a lot of expertise that's required before I can go talk to the public about what I'm representing or what this product is, so to speak. The case is not here. I mean, what training do they have about understanding what the specific product is, and is it what it's all claimed to be, correct?
Right, and in your case, you can actually be prosecuted.
That is for sure.
If you misrepresent your financial advice is a misrepresentation. So here we have tens of thousands of distributors, and they are so uncontrolled that in the case of, for example, Herbalife, a publicly held company would declare in their 10Ks that they could not assure the investors that their distributors would adhere to their own policies. That's
not a good thing.
And they're saying it literally in writing year after year in their annual 10K. So the issue of false product claims has been around for a very long time. An organization called truthinadvertising.org did an investigation and found that these were particularly prominent in products that had health or nutritional claims, even to the point of saying that this could assist in dealing with issues like autism or cancer or something like that. The other area where we're getting a lot of false claims is in earnings or income statements, income claims. So when people say, I made $70,000 last year doing this, or I made $70,000 last month doing this, when people say that, there really is no way to verify it. And unfortunately, there's a vested interest inside of the organization to allow these statements to stand. So it becomes part of the lore of the organization and of the culture. And so we know for sure that people have later admitted that they lied about how much earnings that they have been able to get through multi-level marketing. So we know for sure there's some false earnings going on. We know for sure there's some extreme income claims being made. And what we call, I know you mentioned the private jet plane, what we would call lifestyle videos. These videos of people in fast cars and fancy boats and fancy airplanes or house in Maui or et cetera, all trying to convey this image of extreme success. And the interesting thing is that there's two things that they say consistently in the industry. One is success is based on hard work, and two is everybody can do it. First of all, I'm not at all convinced that success is based on hard work. And the second thing is, while maybe anybody can do it, everyone can't do it. Because if everyone does it, then nobody's going to make that kind of money.
True. You run out of other people.
Yep. And it won't move up line.
Right.
So if everyone was out there succeeding at this, the earnings would be spread out more thinly across a large number of people, and the entire industry would change. The industry persists like it does with the stories that it has because a small number of people make a heck of a lot of money by the recruitment of a large number of people who will make nothing.
Right. It's very interesting. And I think in the last time you brought up how what they tend to do is they'll start one. So if I'm one of that small group, I don't know what the group number is. I'm going to 5, 10, 20 people. I don't know how you can tell. You probably tell me better than I'm just guessing.
Right.
And then they turn around and they go, okay, well, here's another product I'm going to sell. And here's 2 or 3 people in the previous organization that were doing really well. So let me bring those 2 or 3 really good salespeople in and start this next XYZ program.
Right.
And the 5 or 10 of us are going to go out.
Correct.
And recruit our existing friends and family and our existing database, really. They're going to go back and re-recruit, is what I'm envisioning. Right. Is that what happens?
They will do that, and it is not, by the way, unusual for people to have sort of repeat joiners, thinking, well, maybe it's this one I will be successful at. But there's also, they'll take the model and they'll move it into sort of a new market. And so a few years ago, right here in our area, there was a company called Vemma, V-E-M-M-A. And Vemma decided that what they would do is they would build their model on college students, and even did some recruiting in high schools. So I literally had a student stop me in the hall over at TCNJ, and he knew of the work I had done. And he said, do you know this company's recruiting on our campus right now? And so I found it very interesting. And about that time, this nonprofit, truthandadvertising.org, got interested in Vemma. And all of a sudden, we started getting all kinds of emails and phone calls. I talked to students at the University of Toronto. I talked to students at universities out west. I talked to a high school student in Pennsylvania. And I exchanged emails with a mother who was concerned about her son who had dropped out of college to pursue this. So eventually, the FTC took notice, and they prosecuted Vemma as a pyramid scheme. And although Vemma denied it, what the FTC does, which is they're inclined to do, is to get the companies to agree to certain kinds of changes, and they're sufficient enough so the company can't recover from it. The problem with the pyramid scheme from the company's perspective is if you're operating a pyramid scheme, it's an existential prosecution. You will no longer exist as a company if they're successful prosecuting you. And so that's why Herbalife was so set to fight hard when Bill Ackman went after them. And it's when we see big money being spent to try to prevent this prosecutions, then we end up with literally companies fighting for their life.
Interesting. Wow. So how do some of those prosecutions flow through? Because as you said, the data seems to be difficult to find.
Right.
And how does the FTC, how do they approach this from a prosecutorial standpoint?
That's a really good question, because we're actually in a sort of pivot point right now. The FTC has always taken the same position. And of the 27 significant FTC prosecutions that I know of, the FTC was successful in all 27. And so they've been very successful with their approach. And their approach has been that if you are not a pyramid scheme, then you must have good evidence of the success of your product in the marketplace. In other words, beyond distributors. If the only thing that is keeping your company going and the only thing that is generating these significant rewards that you're touting to potential recruits is the purchases of distributors themselves, and these purchases are required in order for those distributors to be eligible for an earning, then in fact, it isn't even clear that you have a viable product for the marketplace. And what we found in the two recent cases, the Vima case and a case called Burn Lounge. In Burn Lounge, it was a relatively small scheme, about 20 million or so. The FTC was successful in closing them down. They appealed it and it went to the appellate court level, the Ninth Circuit. And that was interesting because the Ninth Circuit was very clear in their decision, which was to uphold the lower court, the successful prosecution, is that Burn Lounge could not demonstrate what the court called market demand, or maybe they used the term consumer demand. But the point was that it wasn't sufficient to demonstrate that your distributors wanted to buy the product. Now, the reason I mentioned that we're at sort of a pivot point is ever since those two prosecutions, Vima and Burn Lounge, the industry has pivoted and tried to say, and it's actually gotten congressional supporters to introduce legislation that said it doesn't matter who buys the product.
Really?
Right. And that's
okay.
a big difference. Because
that is a huge difference because I'm just thinking about a large company. That's like saying that, I don't know, Johnson & Johnson, our company employees are the ones that buy our products, but nobody else does.
Correct. It's very
that
similar.
That would be very odd to me.
And we reward them for doing that.
Yeah, I'm just thinking out loud now. It's like, to me, that would be just odd that nobody else outside of the company really buys them.
Right, and you can see how, as a business model, in order to sustain any kind of significant rewards, you would have to keep bringing in new employees. And so what's happening there is then the model looks to be very, very much like endless chain recruitment. Now, the industry's defense is if people want to buy the product and use the product, then what's the problem? They just join to be a distributor to get the wholesale price. We're like, okay, well then why do we have this business model? If basically the argument is that this is kind of like a buyer's club, you join in and you get a discount. Why are we rewarding this ongoing recruitment like we're doing? Because what we find, if you compare to customer loyalty in true buyers clubs, like Costco or something, and customer loyalty in multi-level marketing, you'll see they're exactly the opposite. In other words, high customer loyalty in true buyers clubs and low customer loyalty in multi-level marketing. And so it isn't operating like a buyers club. And so if it's not a buyers club and you're doing a lot of recruitment, what is it? But this is a politically powerful company.
Right. And I want to talk about that after the break. You mentioned the politics, and it's very fascinating to me that this has gone up to congressional level, and we'll talk about that when we come back from the break. You're listening to Master Your Finances. Welcome back. You're listening to Master Your Finances. I am Kurt Baker here with Bill Keep, and we're talking about pyramid schemes, and very fascinating to me. In the last segment, you talked about how they're starting to get congressional support for this when that doesn't, I guess it doesn't make any sense to me. Can you explain like how that's evolved?
I think one of the lessons that was learned by Amway back in the 70s and by the multi-level marketing companies that came since the 70s was that this is going to be an industry that is going to be constantly under the eye of the regulators. And so in order to counter that, they became and have maintained a very active political agenda. There is a direct selling caucus in Congress comprised of members of Congress, many of whom might have one of these companies headquartered in their own district. So, for example, I'm originally from Michigan, so the west side of Michigan is where Amway is headquartered. Mary Kay is headquartered in Texas, that sort of thing. There are a number of multi-level marketing companies in Utah, such as Nu Skin. So we'll see these cluster of congressional members who join this caucus to help advocate for the industry. And the industry operates very much as a single unit. In that, because the criticism is of the fundamental business model. In other words, if we prove in a court that you're a pyramid scheme, your company is going to go out of business. The industry as a whole has a vested interest in not criticizing its members. And so one member doesn't pick off another member. And so the example that I typically give is that if Procter & Gamble was making a claim that liquid Tide could do something magical in your laundry, its competitors, the companies that make and market products that compete with liquid Tide, would go to the FTC and say that product can't do that. We know chemically it can't be true. So if Procter & Gamble were to make a false claim about its product or product efficacy, there's a natural sort of self-regulation going on where at least the competitors have it in their vested interest to go to the FTC and say they're making a false claim. In this industry, it's the opposite. In this industry, the vested interest within the industry is for no firm to complain against another firm, even though they compete for distributors, they may compete for market. But because the criticism can strike to the very heart of the business model, they all know that they're going to succeed or fail together as an industry. And so all of that sort of industry awareness or what is essentially consumer protection is gone.
That doesn't sound like a very healthy position as far as because I'm envisioning the people who are probably solicited is what I'm envisioning right now. So you have somebody who wants to earn more money. If somebody's a busy person already and already making a pretty good income, the last thing in the world they're probably thinking about is, let me go start this networking thing, only because they don't have the time and they're already making a decent salary. So I'm envisioning people that are moderate to low income who probably can't afford this as easily or as readily as some of the people, some other people in society. I guess it seems to me like it's. And do we have any information on who they tend to market or how they tend to?
We have some. It's very hard to get reliable information on the industry. We know that tight economies are good for them, and we know that there has been some targeting of communities, lower income communities. Herbalife was known to operate heavily in the Hispanic community. There's a nonprofit in New York City that did a study of lending done by Grameen Bank USA. And Grameen Bank USA makes microloans to low-income people. And during the period of the study, the nonprofit found that a third of the loans were being made to women who were going to join multi-level marketing companies. Now, here's sort of the kicker to that. The CEO or the president of Grameen Bank, I'm not quite sure of her title, used to be CEO of Avon.
Interesting transition.
Interesting, very interesting.
Because I'm sure she had access to a tremendous amount of data before she took that new position.
She certainly did.
And yeah, it's not direct evidence, but certainly is suspect to.
It's very bothersome.
Why she would do that and how.
I mean, I've often described this industry as a troubled industry. They clearly see it differently, and they will point to the fact that people can make money at this, and that they do have products that perform. In other words, if a company is selling even in the case of Vima, it was a nutrition product. In many cases, if you follow the directions, you will lose weight or you will do whatever. Just like if you would have bought something down at GNC or something and followed the directions.
Right.
Typically, we find that the margins on these products are quite a bit higher than we would normally see in a retail store, and that helps to account for the flow of earnings upline. And so it's a very interesting kind of business that people casually get into and get out of. We know from an AARP survey that at least half of those people in the survey said they lost money. Another I think the actual percentages were like 47% said they lost money, and another 20-some percent said they didn't make money. But there is also an opportunity cost. I mean, your time is worth something. And so the reality is that the probability of making anything is very low, and that you will be, in order to remain eligible for earnings, you will be spending money on products that probably are higher priced given the quality relative to what you could buy in a store.
So if you're in one of these income categories that we described, and you mentioned college students, I mean, that's kind of disturbing, or high school students being asked to, I mean, they're generally not the wealthiest of our society, asking them to get involved in something like this, and when they're literally trying to get started in their careers. And you mentioned the one lady, her son actually quit college to start something like this. So
Right.
he needs to finish his education as well.
Right.
You don't want
Actually,
to divert.
the patter from VEMA recruiters themselves was that you don't need to study college. Your business professors don't know anything
That's
about.
even worse than I thought.
Yeah, they don't know anything about business, otherwise they'd be rich. And so therefore, you don't need to do this. We're going to teach you how to do this. And unfortunately, and this is not just true in VEMA, but in other multi-level marketing companies, if you're not succeeding, their answer is that you need to double down. You need to buy in even more. You need to go to more seminars that cost you money. You need to hire a coach or a consultant that will cost you money. Yeah, there's a whole coaching industry out there for this.
Is it
too.
really?
Yeah. It's a very interesting industry where the average person only sees the tip of the iceberg.
Wow. So what do we do? I mean, I know you're prosecuting. I mean, is it kind of like they're growing faster than you can tamp them down, or is it?
Well,
I mean, you have Congress involved at some point. You said, they're soliciting Congress. I mean, is there anything happening on a congressional level? I mean, I'm trying to envision what's the
right.
direction we're headed here now.
Right. I'd say that there's no single direction. We happen to be in an environment where the President of the United States had his own multi-level marketing company and had lent his name to another multi-level marketing company. And so that doesn't bode well for sort of the general tone inside the executive branch of the administration. The Federal Trade Commission has continued to bring some suits, and they did put Herbalife into a 7-year monitoring situation. There are, some states have brought cases. There is a case right now. The state of Washington has brought against a company called LuLaRoe. So there are some activities. We've really gotten a big boost, and I know I've mentioned this organization a couple times now, but truthinadvertising.org is about a 7-year-old nonprofit that has done a tremendous amount of work in exposing false statements and product claims, income claims with regard to multi-level marketing. That's not all they focus on. They focus on untruthful advertising in lots of different ways, but the director there has really done a really nice job in getting some of her resources to look at multi-level marketing. So that's kind of where we are. There are a small number of us in the country who help prosecute these cases. But unfortunately, and this is really appropriate since we're sitting here at Rider University, there are probably more than 200 faculty members at universities around the country who operate in an affirmative way for the industry. So the industry has an education arm called the Direct Selling Education Foundation, and they dole out money to faculty in the form of grants, and there are other kinds of perks if you associate with them. And then in the hopes of those faculty talking favorably about this industry in their classes, in their writings, or whatever. And I'm talking about faculty at all kinds of universities, including Northwestern University.
Wow, that's fascinating. Coming up on a break, we'll be right back. You're listening to Master Your Finances. We'll talk more about Multi-level marketing when we come back just in a few minutes. Welcome back. You're listening to Master Your Finances. I am Kurt Baker here with Bill Cook, and we're talking about and we're talking about how this is going into higher education, which to me is a little concerning if you're literally having people with reputations and schools with reputations encouraging people to follow a path which has a very low probability of success.
Right. And it's happening in at least a couple hundred campuses or more around the country. And it's bothersome for a couple of reasons. First of all, we happen to be in a period of time, and this may be hard to believe, but I think this period of time will not last forever. But we're in a period of time where entrepreneurship is positioned as sort of the panacea. It's going to solve all of our problems. Everybody's going to be an entrepreneur. Entrepreneurial firms are going to solve all of our problems. Entrepreneurs are the secret to the future, so to speak. And so this opportunity is presented, this multi-level marketing opportunity is presented as a form of entrepreneurship. You're going to build your own business. The irony here is, of course, that the failure rate in multi-level marketing is much, much, much higher than any other kind of a startup. And the response that the industry would give is, yeah, but the investment is much less. You get in, you try it, you don't succeed. But because of all the other problems I described about whether or not, in fact, you must mislead people to succeed, that's left out of the equation. The other interesting irony is that the industry or companies in the industry will often look at the economy around us and say, look, you're working for somebody else, or you're not working now. You we've seen people do it. You can earn a lot of money doing this. And so in effect, what they're saying is where you are on the income distribution spectrum in your current position, you can do much better. So we invite you into an industry to try to be in a different place on that income spectrum. But when you look at the reward, how the rewards are distributed in the multi-level marketing industry, it is much more uneven. Income distribution among earners in multi-level marketing is much more uneven than the unevenness we see in the normal economy. So they're actually inviting people who are not doing well in one environment into an environment where the probability of doing well is much worse.
That doesn't sound very good for you, not only from an economic, but from an emotional perspective. I mean, if you're down and out on your luck or having a rough time, you're like, oh, well, go try this. We have this structure, quote unquote. Because I'm envisioning, because I remember this. I mean, it's kind of like it's a franchise, right? So we have a system. If you follow our system, it works.
Right.
So that's kind of what they're telling you. And if you're following it, it doesn't work. That means you're not following it the right way.
Right. The secret is hard work.
But they're not really telling you.
Hard work, and anybody can do it. You didn't do it, so you didn't work hard enough. But in fact, of course, this isn't at all like franchising. Franchising is a very specific thing.
Right.
Franchisors and franchisees have access to a lot of data. Franchising is a fairly complex contract. If you're going to enter into
they
it.
only succeed if you succeed. I mean, the whole idea is they're going to go out and help you with your location for your store because they want to make sure that once the land is purchased, that all this investment actually does get a return because they're getting a percentage of your revenue. I agree 100%. It's a totally different structure, and I know they put a lot of, and that's really why people franchise is they say, hey, you've got my branding, you've got this, and you're going to help me with my actual structure and set up my shop, and we're going to have ongoing relationships where if things change, we're going to get, education on how my location can do a little bit better.
Correct, and when you compare that to the multi-level marketing industry, where in fact the earnings that flow upline to the very top earners come overwhelmingly from people who didn't succeed. It's a completely opposite kind of model. And yet they will often say, well, this is kind of like retailing, this is kind of like franchising, this is kind of like having a store without having a store. You don't have that overhead. It's not like any of those things.
Right. I think this comes down, just talking over this period of time, I think it comes down to the data. I mean, if they can actually give you verifiable data on what's actually happening,
Right.
then I think that, like most companies, they have that information. They're just not sharing it with us. So you can't tell as an investor, even if it's $50, I don't really know what the likelihood of that return is going to be. You really can't tell because none of the literature actually gives you real disclosures. Because I know everything that I do, you have to have real disclosures on what you think is going to happen.
That's
Or
correct.
what you know won't happen necessarily.
That's correct. And the data isn't there. The industry reveals data, but it's massaged heavily, and we don't have any way to verify it. But even with the industry data, what's kind of interesting is that the total amount of reported retail sales for the direct selling industry constitutes less than 1% of U.S. retail sales. Yet, the total number of people reported to be in the industry, participants in the industry, equals about 8% of the U.S. adult population.
Well, that's just a significant number by itself. That means literally 1 in 8. Just from that number, are even like part of the retail.
It's a little higher than that, but it's not much different.
It's
a huge 8% of the U.S. adult population all doing the same thing is huge.
Right, agreed. And they're not, that means most of them, as you're pointing out, are not contributing to those retail sales, right?
That's right. And remember, even if we think of the retail model where we're going to go out and we believe in the product and we're going to go out and sell the product, in multi-level marketing, it is a all against all competition. So, you may live in the same neighborhood I live in. We both joined this multi-level marketing company. We're selling to the same people.
Right.
Now, if basic economics tells us if 5 more of us in the neighborhood start selling to the same people, then either one of 2 things are going to happen, and maybe both. The selling price is going to go down,
right,
or people are going to go out of business, or both.
Interesting. Yeah, because I'm thinking like other large business. Like if this was successful, why doesn't Bezos start his own company like that? I mean, he's kind of figured out how to sell stuff, right? He's a retail expert.
Yeah.
But I don't really see that operation.
No, but Warren Buffett has one.
Oh, does he really?
Yeah, he owns a company called Pampered Chef.
Okay.
Which has not actually been doing very well lately. I think it's had a recent good quarter, but that's contrary to its earlier trend.
Well, that brings up an interesting point. So how do some of these older, more established ones that have been around a long time, I mean, how do we have any information on how those cycles go? They seem to be trudging along at some level.
Right. We don't. Most of these companies, a large percentage of these companies are private. And so as you know, the only thing a private company has to do is pay its taxes. Mm-hmm. And so a private company doesn't have to tell anybody, show anybody its books. It has to be honest about its earnings and has to pay its taxes. And so we don't have the data. We don't know. We do know there's a pattern of how companies will sort of grow and grow and grow and then quickly start going international so that they can grow in those markets. Because there's always a risk, particularly in this kind of an effort, of saturation. But there are often discussions of this as if, in so many cycles, it's going to exhaust the population of the United States. But that doesn't actually happen in that way because people will get out and get back in. So that top limit isn't a fixed limit. Companies will always talk about new products or they're rejiggering the rewards in some small way. And again, none of that data gets out publicly that we can see what's really going on.
So there's a lot of cloak and dagger going on here, it sounds like. It's hard to tell what's actually...
It's a very strange industry. And one that I would urge people to think very hard about before they join it. Because I think that this industry needs a really hard look. There are some people who are in a position to do it and who know how to look, what to look for. Unfortunately, there are also, I talked to a prosecutor once not too long ago who said to me, if somebody can make money in one of these schemes, it can't be a pyramid scheme. And I said, somebody has to make money or it doesn't work. We have to have success in order to have the fraud.
All right.
Right?
That would make sense. Somebody's making money. They wouldn't create the organization, correct?
Exactly. And you have to show people. Otherwise, that's the lure, right?
Right.
I'm going to attract you in because I just demonstrated how successful you can be. But you won't be.
Wow. That's incredible. So any last thoughts that we should spread around before we...
I think real hard about it before you join it. And I have looked at a couple of earnings statements. And basically what you're going to find is distributors and even some of these large companies make less than what they would make working, part-time at minimum wage.
Well, there you go. There you have it. So advice is try to find something else to do. These have a very low probability of success. So try to stay away. You've been listening to Master Your Finances. You can follow us on Facebook, as well as listen to this podcast and all our podcasts and subscribe at masteryourfinances.us. And remember that together we can master your finances. You can enjoy financial peace of mind.